Hello everybody. I've been thinking about this video and have come to realize that I'm not going to be able to do a video that will encompass it in its entirety because of the amount of time and energy it would take to truly put together the entirety of it in a way that would keep people interested and following along, having all of the information make sense, verifiable, etc., on top of, well, all of the details. And in order to show somebody the bigger picture, telling them the details is one thing. Being able to put the details together in like a documentary format where you can show a storyline, a picture, paint a picture, narrate the thing, explain the details while the pictures are being shown, that's a lot of work. To truly express everything that I would want to express if I had the ability to share this stuff with the world, I would literally need a 2 or 3 part documentary to put it all together, to truly illustrate in an effective way, and in a 2 or 3 part series of 2 hours each, I guess, and that's being as concise as possible to truly show the gravity of it. That's how vast this subject is that I'm about to explain to you. Now, some of the stuff that you've heard me say, or that you're going to hear me say, you've heard me say before, but I'm going to pass by it in passing points to illustrate something, I think, much bigger, to make the picture much more clear for people who may not have seen this, who may be putting together the pieces of the puzzle themselves and still not finding some of this stuff. So, to the degree in which you understand what the people who run the show know, study, and practice as far as the esoteric and occult, will you believe that at a foundation of what it is they do or know is there a solid and probably a fairly masterful grasp of some of the Hermetic principles. And I've referenced a few of these before. I've said repeatedly that there's an all-out assault on the mind. I pointed to mentalism as a foundation for why that's important. The first Hermetic principle tells us that the all is mind, and all that stuff that anybody that's followed my stuff might have a sense of. If you're hearing this and you don't know about that, the first Hermetic principle is the all is mind, the universe is mental. And it lends itself to the fact that the whole perception, the whole experience of the human is predominantly a mental one. We are psychologically based beings, we are electrically based beings, we are emotional beings, we are born ignorant, therefore we are profoundly manipulatable. We are influenceable. There's a period of time when we are born that we're indoctrinated. I think one of the underlying points that's being said with the all is mind, the universe is mental, is the mental nature of the human experience, the mental nature of the human condition, the mental nature of the makeup of the experienced reality of the human being. And when you say mental, mind. So, people hear the word mind control and think that that's all conspiracy theory stuff and that's all that, crazy people talk. They don't think that it's possible. They don't have a very good understanding. When you understand the Hermetic principle and understand how the mind is at the center of the human perception, the human experience and perception, that it makes sense that the powers that be who have wanted to control humans for such a long time, that know that they cannot do this physically. So what they've been able to do is work on our minds. I want to illustrate something to you that I hope will open you up a little bit more to a better understanding of some of the things that I've been talking about in previous videos relevant to how we're made and how we're designed, because this is going to point out some of the mechanisms and ways that the powers that be on this planet, or simply wicked men that know more than you, it's going to illustrate that they absolutely know about these equations within us, these inherent vulnerabilities, these mechanisms that are exposed, that are like a turtle without a shell on its back, exposed and vulnerable and weak. And I'm going to illustrate to you a few things that should tie all this together in a way that I don't think many people really consider this stuff. So a lot of people don't understand the importance of protecting our minds. Most people are really not consciously aware of how the mind is the center of the human experience. The mind is where perception takes place. So, your perception is the core of your experienced reality. There's all kinds of theory on this, but when you look at what the mind is, that's pretty much where the conscious pilot
of the ship that you're operating, call your meat suit, your body a meat suit, that's the ship I'm referring to. The pilot of that ship is in your mind, or at least that's where most of us reference that. Our awareness, our thinking, if you say, where do you point to your head. So the mind is where the perception lives, I suppose you could say. The perception is so important. Now, because the fact that we are mind-based beings, it has always perplexed me since I began to become aware of these things, how unaware of our minds we are, how little ability we have by default to protect and guard the mind, and how few people are aware of the fact that you need to guard your mind like a mother bear who is actually being attacked and she's protecting her cubs. Think of how ferocious that mother bear would be up until the point where she dies, if that's the way it goes. That's how you have to be with guarding your mind, with protecting your mind, because the mind is the core of it all. It's where you think, it's where you perceive, it's where you process, it's where you create. The chemicals in the brain, I don't want to tie the brain to the mind, but in the mind where we think, those thoughts kick off chemicals in the brain that cause us to feel feelings, emotions, everything from love to hate and everything in between. So it all ties together. The mind, the perception is the absolute core of the perceived experience of the human being, of the perceived experiential reality. And I probably should do an expose specifically on that. I'm trying to just emphasize that point within, for instance, a 5-minute opening window of this presentation, just to substantiate to you the fact that it is the most important thing. It is the absolute most important thing for the human being. And we, as a species, are so largely unaware of this, do very little to protect this, have no inherent mechanisms to protect this, and we as a species, because of this, are absolutely having our asses handed to us. We are being manipulated on levels that few people could really wrap their mind around if the whole of it was sitting in front of them, the whole of the truth of how badly we're being manipulated, because we're mind-based beings. That's the thing. When I start to explain this to you, keep in your underlying awareness that all of this that I'm explaining to you and all of the things that I'm putting forth here, all the things that I'm saying is happening. They're happening because we're mind-based beings, and the perception is at the core of it all. So since they can't put chains and shackles around everybody's necks, since they can't physically control everybody, since they can't physically extract from us in the way that they do, or are able to extract from us, the only other way that they have to be able to do these things is to manipulate the mind, to condition the mind, to indoctrinate the mind, to continuously repeat things over and over, because they recognize that if they can get things into your subconscious mind, past the filters of the conscious mind, for adults, for instance, that once they get in there and plant the seeds, once they get a pathway in, they've got you. It makes sense when you look at the fact that the mind is the core of the human experience, and that perception is the core. And I can quantify that by saying, you just got to consider the fact that humans are mind-based beings. Thoughts, emotions, thinking, perception, that's all in the mind. That's the core perception of reality. So we are mind-based beings. We are psychologically based beings, and we are emotional beings. And we're born ignorant. So that means we have to be indoctrinated. We have little to no instinct either. So we must be indoctrinated by our parents. Turns out we're indoctrinated by a hell of a lot more than our parents. And that's what I'm trying to illustrate here. Because in the way in which we are indoctrinated, and the fact that the people that have ill intentions know that during the process of the human development, the process of indoctrination is by design, because we're born into this world with our brains in the theta state, which by default bypasses, gets straight past the consciousness, the conscious mind, where there may be any awareness or filters. The powers that be understand that anything that gets through the conscious mind or the conscious filters, or if you're a child and there are no filters, it's going to go into the subconscious mind.
Now think about that for a second. Now, as we are made, we are compartmentalized in the makeup of our mind, yet we are mind-based beings at our core. We are compartmentalized in such a way that the conscious mind, where the awareness is, where the intellect is, and all that other stuff, resides in the consciousness, the conscious mind, which is about 5% of the show. The subconscious mind, that runs 95% of the show. And that's the part of the mind that, well, it runs 95% of the show. We don't have direct access to the information that's going into it when we're being programmed, which is largely from birth until we're about 21, through all the various processes and mechanisms of indoctrination that we experience by way of our parents, religion, societal influences, television, Hollywood, movies, and all these things that are beating us in our minds. And the fact that we're exposed to such things in the way that we are, in the levels that we are, at the level in the concentrated amount of hours per day that people spend, while their minds are also being put into a theta state. For instance, the television puts the mind into a theta state, and while you might have a consciousness as you're older and even into adulthood, the flicker rate of the television is such that it puts the mind into that theta state, thereby making it more suggestible, making the mind more, the potential for things to get past the conscious awareness, the conscious filters, is much more possible. One of the biggest weapons that has ever been wielded upon man is the television, because it's a weapon and we don't know it. It does things to us and we're unaware of it. It can get into our minds, and does, on levels that we are so unaware of it's scary, and influences our perception, influences our mind, influences us what to think, what to like. It lends itself to why in the process of watching a 1-hour TV show, you'll see the same commercials as many, 10 times, 12 times. They run those commercials over and over. And if you veg in front of the TV all day, you'll see the same commercials from morning until night, over and over and over and over, because they know the adult has more consciousness, more awareness, and more filters. Therefore, through the process of watching TV, that theta state is going to be induced at some point, and the mere repetition of their commercials over and over and over again will at some point throughout that day, and if not that day, the next week, considering it's a habit that we do, they will eventually slip their information, their ideas, past that conscious filter, because you're going to get induced into the theta state. The theta state is kind of like a hypnagogic trance, if you actually have any understanding of this, and we're very suggestible. Our minds are very influenceable in that state. I mean, a perfect case in point of the fact that how influenceable we are in that state is the fact that when we're born from age 0 to like 6 or 7, the default brain state of the child is theta. Right. Obviously, the child doesn't have the consciousness and awareness nearly as much. It's still to be developed. But because the human is born ignorant, we have to be indoctrinated. And to make the process of indoctrination easier, I suppose, whatever created us made it so that the brain state goes into, and we're born into the theta state, so that we're so much more easily programmed by our parents. Now, when you start looking at the world that we live in, and the things that are programming the subconscious mind, and start analyzing all of that stuff, that becomes a little unsavory right there. Because here's the problem. As we are compartmentalized in our makeup, our minds are compartmentalized, we do not have direct access into the subconscious mind. We do not have direct control over the period of time of our lives, for the most part. While this information is being put into our minds, we're not consciously aware of it, and to such a large degree, we do not have control of any of the information that gets put into our subconscious mind. And this goes from everything from, if you have toxic family, toxic parents, toxic friends when you're young, toxic teachers, you watch poisonous television with all kinds of violence. There's just so many ways that all kinds of things can get into the subconscious mind. With this unawareness, parents will let their children sit in front of the television and experiencing the most violent TV. Some of them may claim and do filter some of the TV, but by and large, people don't realize who owns, controls, runs, and operates all of those mechanisms that create those TV shows, the agendas that they're weaving through those mechanisms, those mechanisms of entertainment. They recognize that the TV is perceived by the masses as a mechanism of entertainment. Therefore, they have no idea of the weapon that's actually being used against them. They don't understand. They have no awareness of the fact that this weapon produces a state of the mind where the mind is induced into a theta state, a subjectable state where it can be influenced and programmed, and it can bypass the conscious filters. And when you realize the fact that so many people fall asleep with the television on, as adults, any and all conscious filters that you have at that point are not being utilized. And if you can hear things, it's going into your mind. It lends itself to why, I guess you could say, in some of those self-help genres, they have those tapes that you can play for yourself at night while you're sleeping, or, there's a reason for that. And I think it lends itself to the fact that at night when you're sleeping, things can still get into the mind, and it's probably getting into the subconscious mind. I think those self-help things are trying to do that stuff, to get that stuff, the self-help type stuff, into your mind while you're sleeping, because there are less filters and things have more of an ability to get into and enter into the subconscious mind, thereby being a part of us, becoming a part of what runs the show. There's a little piece there, though, that in order for that to become really a part of you, you've got to create the synaptic connections in your brain for all that stuff to start working and becoming a part of you. So there's more to it than just doing that. But that's a side note for a different conversation. When you start looking at all the stuff about how we're made, and then all of the things that we're subjected to. Now, if you have toxic parents, good luck to you. But let's say you have great parents. Aside from how do I say this? Let's say you have great parents who are born, who are balanced and healthy and all that other stuff. You're still gonna be part of the society where you're being bombarded by what? Family that they don't have control over, friends that they may not have control over, people at school that they don't have control over, the influence of school that they don't have control over, religion. Anything on television that they may not have control over, the influences of pop culture, Hollywood, however the music industry influences the mind in the way that it does by way of showing you their stuff on the TV. There are societal influences. There are so many things that because of the TV, we are exposed to and exposing our children to, and toxicities and thought-type parasites, if you will, about like violence, that we are allowing to just be bombarded into the eyes and ears of our developing children, while their minds are open books being programmed. Where on top of that, we're doing this video game thing over the last 20 years that's just exponentially increased. It's an epidemic of the level of violence that's in the vast majority of these games. We see a lot of the kids developing these skills and going into the military and doing, being great drone operator pilots. Another side note that I don't want to get to digress on, but think about what I'm saying here. I mean, if you can, listen to this video, get a whiteboard, paper on the wall, something. Write this shit down. Map it out. It shows a picture. It shows a picture that is conducive to an all-out assault on our minds. Again, they cannot control us all physically. They cannot wrap chains around our necks, our ankles, and physically force us to do X, Y, or Z. The way in which you control the human being is to control its mind. Because if you can control its mind or influence its mind, your ass will follow. When you start recognizing the fact that the powers that be have understood these aspects of the human and how to get in there and influence it, to manipulate the minds of the masses for a long time, it becomes all too clear. I mean, there's a Jesuit maxim that specifically says, "Give me a child until it's 7 years old, and I will give you the man." Think about what they're saying. It alludes to what they know. All of religion has known this. Most of the powers that be on the planet have known this, but they haven't had the ability to provide such mass influence in the way that they can in today's world, because they haven't had throughout the course of history things like the radio and the television, and then now the internet, to absolutely bombard people's minds with information that poisons and toxifies the mind, the perception of reality, the perception, oh my God, in ways that they never otherwise would have. The fact that we are so unaware of our own makeup, the fact that we are so unaware and oblivious and ignorant to the fact that the psychology of the human being and what goes into the mind from all of these things, well, just know, as a whole, is so important to the betterment, the well-being of that human being a balanced being. Now, this world is designed specifically designed to do a lot of things, but one of them is to knock you off balance, to keep you from being a centered being. I mean, it's really, if you look around, it's pretty obvious. Anybody, even if you still got your head in your ass, you can probably agree that that's a fair statement. So if the Jesuits know that the child, give me a child until it's 7 years old, that should tell people. Edward Bernays was also a learned man. He had the opportunity to study from the quote-unquote master himself, Sigmund Freud, and he took it to the next level and began studying the groupthink, the masses. And then from Edward Bernays comes propaganda, public relation, and marketing. All of these things manipulate the minds of the masses. Propaganda. If you don't know what that word means, if you don't actually know in your head what the definition of that word means, just do a Google search, type in the word propaganda. It's government influence. It's all the way down to government lies to influence what you think. That is what propaganda is. And since the TV and the government has access to that and a lot of control over that, people just don't even realize. They just have no concept of the amount of propaganda that is being beaten over their heads and jammed into their ears and down their throats every single solitary day they watch that television. What is public relations? What do the PR people do? They spin things. They lie. They're masterful liars. That's what public relations is. It's all designed to spin the truth, to fabricate an image that in 99.55999, whatever, that image is skewed from the reality. And the other thing Bernays came up with was his marketing. And a perfect case in point of what marketing is look at, for instance, pharma commercials. That's marketing. Lying to you, continuously jamming the same thing in your face, down your throat, in your ears, over and over and over. These are the tactics of propaganda, PR, and marketing. Specifically, propaganda and marketing are really, really, I guess PR too, it fits, but you just don't see it as much. They're designed to influence you, what you think. Look at what Edward Bernays says in the book Propaganda, about your likes, your desires, what you want, what you buy, all these things about you that you don't even realize are being influenced by other men. These desires you have, all that stuff's crafted for you and put into your mind by these mechanisms known as the television or the radio back in the day to guide and influence your mind in, for instance, a purchase or any other thing. When I tell you, people, the gravity of it all is too much for most people to want to accept. When you really start doing a deep dive on how much they're working on our minds, I understand really intimately how much we are mind-based beings. I understand very intimately how much our perception matters in our experienced reality. And when you look at, as one massive example, the fear-based bullshit that's been coming out of the television for years and years and years and years now. That's just one example. There's the whole authority agenda, all that. There's just lots of shit coming out of the TV. But combine the fear and authority agenda over and over. That's just been something we've been beaten over the head with over and over and over, just indoctrinating the minds of people. And that which goes into the subconscious mind largely stays rooted deeply. And the earlier on that you can get things into the subconscious mind, intentionally or unintentionally, these things stay with the human. Give me a child until it's 7 years old, and I will give you the man, says the Jesuit priest. Because they understand what's going on in that first stage of life, and that the mind is essentially an open vessel for programming. And when you're, a young child and you're exposed to all this stuff, it's going to be with you. The earlier on that things get into the mind, good or bad, the likelier that it's going to stick and getting deep roots into the mind of that child. And as that child grows into an adolescent, into an adult, and becomes the adult that they're going to be, these things are going to have grown into with deep trees with deep roots, and it will be a part of them. So with wicked people that are in control of these mechanisms, that understand how the brain is and the mind is influenced, understanding these attributes and aspects of the human psyche and how we're programmed, the television is their weapon. The television induces the same state in the human being, even as an adult, as that theta state that the brain is in when the human being is born from age 0 to 7, that predominant brain state of theta, so the indoctrination can happen. There's no filters there. It's all just going into the subconscious mind, where it's the most challenging place for the human to ever remove it from. Think about that. Look at that equation. Write it the hell down if you have to. Let it form a picture in your mind and recognize that there are people on this planet that have absolute control over this stuff, that know this quite intimately, that work very diligently to get things into your mind
and to induce your mind into that theta state. The flicker rate of the screen does it. The flicker rate of the old analog televisions do it, and I believe I'm almost positive it's emulated and simulated in the digital televisions the same way. It gets the mind into the theta state. A parent who has ever tried to gain the attention of their child and watched that after the mother or father said the child's name 4, 5, 6 times, whatever, to the point where they actually had to yell or raise their voice or, rock the couch and yell at them at the same time to have a multiple stimuli scenario hit the kid so it would break it out of the trance. That's known as a hypnagogic trance. That's a real thing. And if you're a parent, you've ever seen that state in your child. If you're anybody and you've ever seen that state in another human being that's watching television, that's the theta state. Now, in the theta state, as an adult, for instance, what they do there is they're able to get things into your subconscious mind and bypass the conscious filters of your own conscious mind. The TV induces the theta state, and then they can bypass the conscious mind, get things right into the subconscious mind, downloading all the info that they want into your subconscious. And if you fall asleep with the TV on and it's always on all night, when your conscious mind is sleeping, any protection that your brain or your psyche could ever provide you against anything that's coming out of the TV is completely off. And anything that comes out of the TV at that point finds its way into the subconscious mind in whatever way. Now think about this. There are wicked men that own and control all of the television news networks, all of the Hollywood, all of media, all of everything, all of the news or television networks that create the television shows. They put the funding in it, all the script writers, all of it, they control it all. Therefore, they can weave themes, agendas, subliminal type things into the scripts of everything that they do. They understand how to use this technology to trick the mind. Think about it. You watch a TV show and it's a sad story, it can take you on an emotional ride. You watch a TV show and it's a really empowering story where like the bad guy saves the day. It's a really, they know how to induce emotion in you. They know so much about your mind that you do not know. And they have been using this television as a mechanism, as a weapon, because it's amazing. It's like somehow I had a weapon that I could use against you that wasn't as painful. It wasn't painful, but and essentially got you to do for me what I wanted you to do, even if it was slowly over time. And it's just amazing. They understand how influenceable the human is. They understand how vulnerable our minds are. They understand that we don't have any inherent protection mechanisms against that. And they understand also that children are sat in front of the TV constantly by their own parents. For whatever reason, parents voluntarily put their child in front of the television to occupy their time while mom and dad do whatever needs to be done. There's so many varying reasons or ways that would manifest. I'm not even going to begin to go there, but I would suggest that, you're sitting there watching television as a child with your mind in the theta state. What the hell's going into your mind? And just because it's SpongeBob, I'm not kidding you. And I've seen this on YouTube because I've never actually sat and actually watched an episode of SpongeBob. But there was a video 5 or 6 years back where somebody was showing something, and it was in a SpongeBob cartoon. And when I saw it, I was just like, "You got to be kidding me! Kids actually are exposed to this shit." And because it's SpongeBob and it's all laugh and giggles, it's all kids land. These people understand the theta state of the mind. They have a mechanism or a tool by which they can even induce the adult mind into the theta state and still continue to get information past your conscious filters into your subconscious mind. How do I substantiate that? Why do you think advertisers spend billions of dollars a year annually trying to get their information into your frickin' head? Why do you think that when you're watching a 1-hour television show and you see the same commercials over and over and over 12 times throughout the course of that television show? Why do you think that is? That repetition. Because maybe one of 12 attempts to put that information into your head, one of them gets through the subconscious or gets through the conscious filter because of the theta state, whether it's all the way induced, partially, whatever. That's what the repetition's for. That way, when it comes time for you to make a purchase or make a decision, your subconscious is going to cause you to pick this product instead of that product. It's amazing what they know about the mind that we do not know. It's amazing how keen of an instrument they have as a weapon that they're using against us, and we actually think it's a mechanism by which we are entertained. And what has spawned all of this? It's a very deep understanding of how the mind, the psyche, the emotional body of the human being, how fragile that can be. It's a deep understanding of the fact that we're programmed, and that the way in which we're programmed, things go into the subconscious mind, whether we know it or not. And that once they get in there, for the most part, once that developmental part of the brain and the mind stops and things pretty much shut, it becomes extremely challenging to get into the subconscious mind if one should ever be lucky enough to reach a stage of consciousness and awareness that they recognize that the things that are in their subconscious mind are not serving them. And those things could range everything from bad habits, belief systems that they don't necessarily know where they've got, indoctrination that they recognize that's in them, from religion, from school, from just this stuff that we get as kids. We don't even realize how much of it. We have no idea of this. How much of it gets into the subconscious mind, which is the part of the mind where this shit sticks. We are so unaware of what the subconscious actually is that we don't protect it. We think about what I'm trying to say. And if the core of the human experience in this 3D existence that we have is its perception, is the mind, where the perception is had, is it the perception and then the mind and the perception, they're both the same, they're different aspects of us, but that's the part of us that I've said before is like the turtle without its damn shell. It's extremely vulnerable. And we are so ignorant to this that mothers and fathers will willingly put their child in front of that thing and walk away and let them sit in front of it for hours and hours and hours. Have no idea, and we begin to wonder sometimes why, children at 7 years old somehow get an idea that maybe they're the other sex than they were born to be. Really? Because that's the real, I'm telling you, that kind of subliminal stuff, that kind of mind programming, that type of thing, it's just the people that own and control the TV have an interest in causing these types of perversions in the mind. And when they have access to the mind in such a programmable state, when we're in such a vulnerable age, when we're developing, think about it. I heard Mark Passio say this once, and it was like standing under a church bell and somebody hitting it with a sledgehammer when he was explaining about how all the evil people do all the things that they do. He was explaining about all the knowledge that they have. And then he was explaining about, well, think about what the knowledge they have gives them the power to do to you. And think about the fact that they can do that and you have no knowledge of it. And because you have no knowledge of it, think of what they can do to you when they use knowledge that they have and you're completely ignorant to it. They can have a field day with you, and they do. The same analogy applies to this thing with our human minds, with the theta state, with the way they use the television as a weapon, with the fact that they understand the theta state so much that they developed a tool that can induce the theta state into a human being. They've developed a tool, a weapon, that most humans will willingly sit in front of and allow themselves to be well, they won't allow it because they don't actually know it, but you're essentially allowing it. Think about this, people. And people spend hours upon hours a day. And when you start calculating this stuff per year, and you start calculating how many people on the planet and you start calculating the amount of time, literally there has been probably tens of thousands of years of combined time, hours and days and weeks and months and years spent, people wasting their time in front of the television. Think about that for a second. But I think this is illustrative enough of what's being done to our mind. I mean, I could go off on this whole rant about, the powers that be and the secret societies and all that stuff they understand and how I've talked about that stuff. The fact of the matter is, when you get down to the nuts and the bolts of how they're influencing us on such profound levels in ways that we are so unaware of, and it has such a profound impact on the psyche of the masses, all the way down to us individually. And we are so unaware of it, it's not even funny. It's a weapon. It's a frickin' weapon that's perceived as a mechanism of entertainment, and it is used in the most malicious way against us. Most people think that a weapon is something where I can harm you physically, where I'm going to draw blood or potentially take your life. Not all weapons are like that. I mean, even biological weapons, they're weapon, but this isn't not one of those type of weapons either, where they hurt you in that physical way. It's not like a sword where I can cut you, or a biological weapon where it's going to ultimately eat your insides and turn your kidneys to fluid and make you die. This is one that gets into the mind and slowly begins to become the cancer. And unfortunately, those people who are so grotesquely unaware of these things will scoff, will say that it's just conspiracy theory shit, because they're so grotesquely unaware, uninformed, have never taken the time to educate themselves, and they just literally have no awareness of these things. They have no frame of reference. This is the kind of stuff that you figure out when you're a couple of steps up on this, the stairwell of knowledge and learning, and you're figuring this out at step 3, step 5, whatever the hell step you on. And the people who are just scoffing, they're still standing at the base of the steps. They haven't even begun to take their first step into understanding any of this stuff. So when you're handing them knowledge that you figured out at step 3, step 5, step 8, or wherever the hell you are along the process, they're just never going to know it. Again, casting pearls amongst swine. It's not calling people pigs, but that frickin' analogy certainly fits when you start looking at it from a perspective of trying to talk to the brain dead. when you're a person of knowledge. You have to dumb it down, and sometimes even when you dumb it down, they still don't want to accept it. Sometimes the truth is called medicine. Nobody likes their medicine. And when you try to hand somebody, quote unquote, the medicine of truth, even with a piece of candy wrapped around it, once they bite into it and taste it, they're going to spit it out because they don't want it. People are so wrapped up into their TV shows. Who's doing what? Who killed JR? That probably shows how dated I am. That was from Dallas from the 80s, I guess, early 80s. But soap operas, nighttime shows, wrestling, MMA, football, NASCAR, you pick it, The things that people waste and occupy their time on because for some reason, something hasn't inspired them to open and read a book or listen to a lecture about something that somebody else that is far more knowledgeable than they are. Rather than do any of these things to further our knowledge and expand our awareness of the world around us or any particular topic that we may find interesting or anything. Nope. We just sit there and watch freaking Archie Bunker. We just sit there and watch Friends. We just sit there and watch Seinfeld. We just sit there and watch 2.5 Men. We just sit there and watch wrestling day after day, after day, after day, after day, after day, after day, after day. You see this? And nobody knows about the brain state. Nobody knows about the theta state. Nobody knows about the subliminal programming. Nobody knows about the influenceable state of the subconscious mind when you're in the theta state. Nobody knows about the flicker rate. Nobody knows about any of this stuff. It's like George Carlin says, nobody seems to notice and nobody seems to care. And that's evidenced by the amount of people that sit in front of the TV every day.
Now, when you've got kids watching television all the time, there's one way your government's getting that fear from all the television stuff. Terrorism, the bad guys, all that stuff, just all those agendas they weave in, all those stories that we sit there and drool on ourselves and think we're being entertained by. These ideas are going into the subconscious minds of children. And because in many respects they're still in a theta state or easily induced into the theta, the television will kick them right into a theta state. The powers that be know so intimately how to do what's necessary to the masses to influence the mind or to guide the mind into a state where they can put their ideas into your mind. And I'm telling you, the best weapon to do that is the television. The best instrument to do that is the television, because all of the little sheeple people look at that thing as something by which they are entertained, and they do not even realize that they're staring a weapon directly in the face every single solitary minute they have it turned on and are watching it. The only time it may not be an issue, and there's just such a small fraction of this that is available to people, is when if you're sitting there watching a nature show, but you got to be aware of the commercials and all that other crap in between the nature show, because it's run by, you got to understand who runs these things, what their agendas are, and why they're doing what they're doing. There's a lot of nefarious things taking place, all of it against the human. It's weird. And you can take some of what I'm saying and I could apply how these equations about, number one, beings that we don't know about, that understand how we're made, that understand how to influence us. Think about it. When you look at how we're made, it is amazing because we are so manipulatable because of the way we're born ignorant, needing to be indoctrinated. Our awareness grows once we become more mature. There's just so many things, so that when you're born into a world as toxic as this one is, also, you're born into a toxic environment that you grow up with. Therefore, this shit becomes ubiquitous to you, and you don't even see the things that are getting into the mind, that are toxifying the mind and the perception, as anything that you may want to filter yourself from. Filter from your children. Hence the reason most parents put their children in front of the television, or don't pay attention enough so that their kids are just sitting in front of the television for so many hours of their awakened life. It's not even funny. The mind is an interesting thing. It's what guides and directs the human. If you don't protect it, somebody's going to get in there and influence it. If you don't feed your own mind with right knowledge and right perception, somebody else is going to get in there and try to do that for you. And they're going to guide and sway and influence your mind and your perception into a method or a way of thinking that suits them, that benefits them and takes from you. It's just, when you start looking at the gravity of this, the depth of this, the lengths in which these men have gone to influence your mind by way of all of these things, these tools, and the money that they've spent and will continue to spend because they continue to extract from us, and the more we produce and grow up and go into the workforce, there's more of us to extract from. They can take our money and use more of our money to use our money to do the things. It's just like, wow. You ever have those Calgon take me away moments? And if you're too young to know what that means, then you're too young to know what that means. But sometimes, man, you just think about all this shit and it's like, wow, the only prayer in hell we seem to have is awakening the minds of people. That's why I do these videos. Seriously, it's the only thing I can think of to do my part, where I'm not going to be faced by a man with a gun called cop telling me I don't have a permit or arresting me for public nuisance or whatever kind of colorful shit. So I can do YouTube videos. I can do videos that I can put on social media, let's put it that way, because we're finding that even the powers that be, the money influencers, whatever they are, they're extending their tentacles into things like YouTube. So stuff like this doesn't even show up on sight of people's videos. It doesn't spread. You know, people that share too much truth, too much logic, too much reason, that make people think too much out of the box, that entice people to get out of the box, that entice people to think critically about what's going on, question the system that they're in, question authority, abandon the box, you know, just do all the things that are opposite of what the fucking herd is doing. In as much as they can do it, they are trying to curb that a lot, meaning the exposure that people like, for instance, me would get. Therefore, my videos won't spread. The only way these ideas would spread is if you guys share them. If there's what you hear me saying here means enough, matters enough, has caused any light bulbs to go off in your head, or you think I've articulated it in a way that you think other people would make sense of it or start to see, please share this. I don't do these videos for profit, but if for some reason you feel like I've done enough work or put enough mind power and time and effort into putting this together that, you know, it was worth something to it and you want to make a donation, that would be awesome. But that's not my major motivation for doing this. My major motivation for doing this is not money. My major motivation for doing this is trying to change the world I live in, because it's driving me crazy. It makes me sick to look about the landscape of the country and the world that I live in. It makes me sick to look at what it is we do to each other as a species. It makes me sick to realize how vulnerable we are as a species. It makes me sick to realize that we were designed this way, and how easily manipulatable we are, how influenceable we are, how vulnerable we are on so many levels that we are freaking oblivious to and unaware of. It's amazing. It makes me sick when I can correlate so much about us as a species to cattle. That bothers me. The only thing I know of in this world that I can do about it is to do videos that might tickle people's critical thinkers into thinking a different way about the fucking world they live in, because if we don't begin to take action, nothing's going to change. I'm sorry I'm not as concise as I probably could be in this, but there's a lot to say. Some of it I've said multiple times, some of it needs to be said multiple times, and some of it, yes, I'm just repeating myself. This is important that people understand this stuff, because it's our grotesque unawareness of these things that allows us to be barraged by the thing, or no, to be, the onslaught that we get, that we allow ourselves to be subjected to, that we allow our children to be subjected to, that we subject our children to knowingly or unknowingly by way of family influences, societal influences, school influences, religion, friends, and all that other crap. And I literally could probably do an hour on each one, just explaining how and all the negative stuff. And this is the stuff that creates the baggage that the human carries. This is the stuff that toxifies the mind in a way that makes it so that it's unhealthy. This is the stuff that, even if you're functional in life, it toxifies the mind in such a way that it may prevent you from ever truly being happy. This is the kind of stuff that is the parasite that plagues most humans. This shit generally is all cross cultures too. This isn't just America. I mean, we can all watch it and see it in America because of how these influencers are all pervasive and exist, but this is something that affects everybody. So the powers that be understand the human psychology so intimately it's not funny. And we don't. That's the problem. Imagine again, turtle, no shell, vulnerable, very exposed. That's us. And when they have something as powerful and as all-pervasive as the television to use, and we perceive it as a mechanism of entertainment, and it's being used as a weapon, think about it. That's how they can control the masses. That's how they can influence the masses and extract from us as well. It used to be you'd have to control them and extract from them by force. Now you can control them and extract from them by influencing their minds, instilling fear in their minds and belief systems in their mind. For instance, income taxes. Everybody believes that. That's come across the television. You probably get most of the influence of that from school, parents, and television. And it's an influencer that influences the mind. That causes them to have the ability to extract. Hell, that causes us to have the voluntary willfulness to give them money, which they're essentially extracting because they've mind screwed us. But this gets so vast. It's so vast. It's just so vast. it really requires some. I would really prefer to even put together a group of documentaries about this type of stuff with other people that see this stuff in the way that I do, the vastness of it all, and maybe contain their own unique piece of the puzzle that actually, you know, or I guess just shows people how relevant what it is that I'm saying is, along with what they're saying. You know, multiple minds that see multiple pieces with multiple views that, but all ultimately understand what's going on. You see what I mean? I tell you, we could have an impact if we could get together, put this together, get it created in a professional way that puts it all together with all the details, illustrated, videoed, you know, all the stuff, imagery, everything. Because the words on top of, you know, narrating something like that on top of the video, for the people to have that visual association, and imagery to have the video and audio association in their head, so it sticks, so they get it, so it sinks in, so they see it. We're like cattle, and we don't even know it. Prove me wrong. Show me where I'm grotesquely flawed in my explanation that I've provided here. Show me where any of this is flawed, wrong, inaccurate, or any other negative thing. Seriously, be logical, rational, share it. Everybody's got a piece of the pie. Share it, bring yours, and then we'll all look at it. And if it, you know, if it makes sense, let's collaborate. Seriously, people need to be aware of this. We're getting mind coitused on levels that are so grotesque it's not funny. And the belief of it is, think about it. When somebody literally is screwing you from behind, there's no way for you to not know about it, right? In the physical. But when they're screwing you from behind by way of doing it to your mind, you don't even know you're getting screwed. That's the problem with this. It's a crass analogy, but tell me it doesn't fit, people. Tell me it doesn't fit well. There's no way for me to fuck you from behind in real life without you knowing it immediately. But when it comes to fucking your mind, if you know enough information, you can mind fuck the world. And they never even know that you're behind them, stroking them. That's sad that that's the condition that we're in. And that's sad that someone like me has figured this shit out, you know, because I'm just your average schmuck.